We are pleased to see that you have opted for a high-quality product made by KIESELMANN. Our products offer you a long and reliable application in case they are duly used and maintained appropriately. This film will show you, step by step, the maintenance of our double-seat valves. Please consider our safety indications for disassembly and assembly. The tools shown here are required for the disassembly and assembly of the valve. You will find the item numbers of the assembly tool kit in the operating instructions of the KIESELMANN double-seat valve. Disassembly. Remove the control air, steam, and/or cleaning pipes and electrical cables, sensor brackets, or control heads from the plant before the valve is dismounted. Unscrew the upper locking clamp. When you apply air, the actuator will be automatically lifted out of the body. A distance is inserted between lantern and shaft seal. Our mechanic uses an appropriate seal. Let the air off again. The valve plate is lifted out of the valve seat. Pull the valve insert carefully upwards out of the body without tilting it. After having unscrewed the lower locking clamp, the lower shaft seal can be removed. To remove the lower piston, the nut in the piston is unscrewed. To do this, hold with an open-end wrench at the top of the actuator. Unscrew the fastening screws of the lantern. Pull the lantern from the piston until you see the bore in the spindle. Place a suitable hinged hook wrench in the bore. Two disassembly situations may arise when the upper piston is removed. Situation 1, the piston comes off the spindle. Situation 2, the piston plate comes off the piston. Situation 1, the piston comes off the spindle. Loosen the piston by means of the assembly plate and unscrew it. Remove the lantern and piston with the shaft seal. Push the shaft seal off against the piston plate. Situation 2. The piston plate comes off the piston. As seen in situation 1, loosen the piston by means of the assembly plate. If only the piston plate loosens, unscrew it, remove the seal, and loosen the upper piston by means of the eccentric and unscrew it. Remove the circlip from the spindle. Push the lift stop from the spindle. If the piston loosens after situation 1, the piston plate must be dismounted. Remove the O-ring in the piston. Tighten the socket spanner of the assembly tool kit in the vise and put piston on. Loosen the piston plate from the piston with the assembly plate and unscrew it. Remove the sealing ring. Remove the O-rings from the piston plate. To remove the lower piston plate from the lower piston, you have to tighten the assembly plate in the vise and put the piston on, as you can see here. Insert the suitable socket spanner in the slot of the lower piston and remove the piston from the piston plate with an open-end wrench. Remove the seals from the piston plate and from the piston. Remove the sealing rings and O-rings of the lift stop and of the shaft seals. Disassembly of the double seat valve is completed. Assembly. Clean and slightly lubricate the mounting spaces and running surfaces. Change all wear parts and lubricate them with a suitable grease before assembly. Fit the O-rings into lift stop. Put the shaft seal in the insert. Put the bearing bush with the chamfered side onto the insert, press it in and tap it gently. Insert the O-rings in the insert. Assemble the second shaft seal in the same manner. Assembly of the lower piston assembly. Tighten the assembly plate in the vise. Fix the lower piston plate on the plate. To make sure that the sealing ring is perfectly pressed, you first screw the piston without the sealing ring in the piston plate until the metallics stop. Mark this position with a paint marker. Unscrew the piston, mount the O-ring in the piston, and put the sealing ring into the piston plate. Now screw the piston plate in by hand. Put the eccentric ring over the sealing ring to make sure that the sealing ring is eccentrically pressed. Tighten the piston with a socket wrench and an open-end wrench until the color marking is reached. Assembly of the upper piston assembly. Fix the socket wrench in the vise. Place the upper piston and screw the piston plate in until the metallics stop. Mark the position with a paint marker. Unscrew the plate. Mount the O-ring and sealing ring and screw the plate in by hand. To guarantee an optimal eccentric pressing, the eccentric ring is put again over the sealing. Screw the piston plate in the piston until the color marking is reached. Place the O-ring on the front side of the piston plate and push it in at the opposite sides respectively. Important: don't grease the O-ring and slot. After you have mounted the O-ring at the bottom of the piston, all seals were changed. Assembly of the lower shaft seal. Put the shaft seal on the bottom of the body. Place the body and mount the locking clamp. Join assemblies. After having greased the threads and running surfaces, the lift stop is pushed onto the spindle and pressed to the actuator up to the stop. Mount the lantern, but not tighten it. Push the shaft seal onto the upper piston. Screw the upper piston onto the spindle at the actuator. And tighten with the assembly plate. Position the lantern on the actuator and screw it down. Mount the circlip. Put the lower piston onto the spindle. Push the washer over the thread. Tighten the piston with the hexagon nut contained in the seal kit. Mount the sensor support. And mount carefully the valve insert in the body without tilting it. Mount the locking clamp and tighten it. To check the valve functions, connect the compressed air pipe at the actuator. Check first main stroke, then stroke below, and stroke top. The assembly was successfully carried out. Disassembly. Pull the 4 sleeves out of the insert with a puller. Remove the insert. Remove the shells and the annular spring from the K-Flex seal. Clean the mounting spaces and running surfaces. Change the wear parts. The seal kit of the K-Flex shaft seal contains the annular spring and the K-Flex seal. Assembly. Put the annular spring into the seal. Lay both shells around the seal. Make sure that the shells fit exactly. Push the assembly into the insert. The sleeves are mounted in the slot of shells with the ground surfaces. The assembly was successfully carried out. Disassembly. The K-Flex sealing ring is supported by a 4-part ring shell and an O-ring. First remove the ring shell, then the O-ring. Clean the mounting spaces and running surfaces after disassembly. Change the wear parts. The seal kit of the K-Flex sealing ring contains an O-ring and a K-Flex sealing ring. Don't throw the 4 supporting elements away. They are not contained in the spare parts kit and are reused. Assembly. Put the O-ring into the sealing ring. Mount the ring shells in the order A, B, C, D. The assembly was successfully carried out.